Good morning. I believe we're live. There is something strange that happens, however, is that Substack, this interface for going live, doesn't quite start the conversation or record the video from when I start talking or from when it says it's live. So what we shall do is we shall see who arrives over the next few minutes. And I shall just, in the meantime, try and prepare. Please bear with me if you're watching this video. There aren't great editing tools for Substack video yet. I think they'll be developing them soon. But it means that as we wait for folks to arrive, I can't clip out this beginning of the video. And another thing, somebody's here. Chan or Shan, you need to tell me how I'm pronouncing that, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'll keep an eye on that. And one more thing, little Maya. It's pronounced Shan. Yeah, I actually reflected on that last night, and I thought I would check this morning. So thanks. Yeah, I was calling you Chan. Sorry. Little Maya, our 4-year-old might be tearing in here in a minute to say goodbye. She's off to her little school, so that's all starting again. No worries, I get it all the time. Yeah, with a name like Rocco, you should have heard the variations I had to grow up with. Yeah. What I want to talk about today is I'm obviously prattling a lot about what's wrong with a conversation, how easily we can get caught in the wrong conversation, how there isn't much of a proper conversation happening online anyway. A lot of people are talking at each other. People are soapboxing, grandstanding, moralizing. And I'm very critical of that, obviously. And that I'm always trying to suggest that we should be working on agency and sovereignty and getting our consciousness and our psyche and our minds clean and clear. And I haven't got anything prepared, but I've been talking about this and teaching this for so long that it's really something I can shoot from the hip about. And we're going to be talking today about what can I actually start doing for myself. What are the parameters of a healthy regimen that I can implement? And it's not just a regimen; it's protocols, it's mindsets, it's practices, it's a directionality and an intentionality we need to commit to, and we need to recognize what's missing and what the cost. I think we already know what the costs are of that, but we'll draw those lines as clearly as we can. And then we'll start talking about, I'll give you some examples about how I implement that. So I don't know if anyone's going to arrive. I think special things happen, on the weekend. And yesterday would have still been Sunday for you lot. So for me already it's 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. So and by all means, Shan, just pile in. You're not getting in the way here with questions and engagement, and so just shoot. So I think I'll get started now. My personal vocation is twofold, right? What I believe in most implicitly is the project of human evolution, and specifically self-directed evolution. If you look at the arc of human history from a certain distance and perspective and vantage point, it's almost like nature gave us all the prompts and all the stimuli and all the tools to bring us up to a certain threshold, right? And what we're sitting at the moment is that threshold of evolution, and we're still unaware of what we would need to transcend in order to transcend that threshold. and that and we don't understand that predictive model of what's necessary in such a project, because our intuitions collectively are to try and get everyone to conform to old systems, or to tried and trusted methods, or to burrow down the answer of technology and science, or to force everybody into a mindset where we can adopt a single theological perspective. And it's so evident to me that all of these exercises and all of these ways that we've developed as a species and as societies have been kind of like a sandbox environment of testing different ways. And if any of the current ways that we have, any of the isms, any of the ideologies, any of the core philosophies, any of the really popular ideas, if they were ever going to work, the assumption is that humanity would be maturing intentionally and adopting these things intentionally and cohering as a result of that, and heading our way towards somewhere better, which we're clearly not. And what we're watching at the moment is all of these ideas clashing with each other. And because all of these different ways, these models of how to do things, these isms and religions and philosophies, and so I'm talking about Western democracy, capitalism, communism, the way that we handle ourselves, the way that we organize ourselves socially. The project all this time has been to try and find a social operating system that is convergent with our ecology. In other words, we're integrated with the platform that we're running on, to use system thinking speech. Here comes Maya. Come and say goodbye. You won't see anybody yet, Donnie. They're not showing up on the camera. Bye. The camera's over there, that way. You can look that way at the camera. Okay. Off you go. Have a beautiful day. Thank you, love. Where was I? So it's obvious to me that all of these different versions of what can work as a collective social operating system have been tried, sometimes at the point of a sword, sometimes we've opted into these things voluntarily, but for whatever, for various reasons, they're not sufficient to galvanize a population that's this complicated, this complex, this technologically advanced. And we've also got some bad software, some bugs in our software running underneath all of that. Am I making sense, Shan? You'll let me know. Yeah? So this is a way of looking at things, right? I'm assuming you're not close to a keyboard. And what to me is so obvious is that our different ways of doing this, our different ways of coordinating, our different ways of collaborating, our different ways of cohering, are going to keep failing to some degree until we understand what about them cannot carry us across this threshold. That's the invitation that life is presenting to us. And inadvertently, we're all playing into that kind of that script, inevitably. Now, there's mythic contexts for that. That's all right. There's sociological framings and language for this. But the point is, even our different ways of explaining this problem don't necessarily converge either, because too many people, especially unfortunately being academically minded the way we are taught as a society to respect voices or ideas or language that come through these hierarchical gatekeeping kind of mechanisms. Now, we can't all have our own language and we can't all have our own ideas and still expect to cohere, we do have to have something convergent. And the problem is with the proliferation of the internet and everyone can write a book and have their own feed, we all now have different meanings for almost every single word that we would need to have common meanings for in order to have a meaningful conversation, in order to start debugging what is working, what's good, what's worth keeping, and what's worth debugging, fixing, refining, and throwing away. So if we think of things like Buddhism or Taoism or Stoicism or even the Athenian model of democracy, in each of these things, there's something of meaning and value that we would want to keep that code line of. But that code line is also enmeshed with a lot of story and narrative. I'll get to it in a second. Is also enmeshed into a lot of story and narrative and skewed predictive models and ideology. And we don't have the wherewithal to tell what is worthwhile essence and what is chaff. In other words, we were talking about that threshing yesterday. And just like that, our ideas have to be threshed as well, or they have to be distilled after they're threshed. We have to separate out what is worthwhile keeping versus what is distortive. Yeah. I wonder though, says Shan, you said yesterday, and I agree, that most people only seem able to achieve self-actualization as a result of trauma. No, that's where the process begins, not achieve, begins. So we are awakened to the necessity of self-ownership, ideally through that threshing, yeah. In that sense, it seems inevitable that if distractions are working so well that they keep people in a limiting state of comfort, although we're in an enormous state of shared discomfort now, individual and shared discomfort, stall the kind of evolution you were talking about. The state of things will need to get worse until the point that people really start to feel it. That's it. That's it. We don't take our circumstances seriously until there's nowhere left to turn. That is, so I've got a little aphorism for that. The aphorism is, discomfort is the cure for apathy. Yeah. And therefore, extreme discomfort is the only viable cure for extreme apathy. And nature is giving us one last gift. One last gift. Nature has imbued us with a physiology, an animal physiology, and below that waterline of our awareness, below the in the umbra, right, of our conscious self-awareness, are impulses, drives, heuristics, that we can become aware of, that we can be educated about, that we can mitigate for, or steer, or lead, or guide, or shape somehow. And it's in our unawareness of all of that that we're creating the trouble that we're in. And the trouble, precisely, again, this is a metaphoric way of looking at things, is precisely because we are out of alignment with an ideal trajectory of actualization, which by definition is related to being out of alignment with our ecology. So I'll get to those in a second. Hi, James. Nice to have you here. So what we're saying then is that one way of looking at all of this, which is not meant to be authoritative or declarative, or it's just the way I see things, is that individually and collectively, in couples, in families, in communities, in nations, and then as a whole, we are on a path of actualization. And like any worthwhile journey, it's not a straight line, and not all of that seems positive in the moment. But the hard parts, the threshing, the getting lost, the losing our way is somewhat inevitable and somewhat necessary. And it's in those iterations and cycles of discomfort that we actually start refining our understanding and our evolution. So I just want to make this one point, and I'll go back and explain that a bit more. What I see happening here now is what is in front of us as a species, a threshold that we are going to have to cross. in the next couple of generations, right? So somewhere between the trouble's really going to start in the next 10 to 15 years. And then we're going to have this collective crisis that we can no longer look away from. And our initial response to that collective crisis is going to be everything predictable. It's going to be jihads. It's going to be ideological wars. It's going to be conflicts, clashes. It's going to be pockets of brilliance and leadership, and really the best of humanity is also going to be called into the field. People are going to be activated and galvanized into different kinds of cultural leadership and thought leadership. But our legacy system and the brokers and the people who have interests in the legacy way of doing things are going to, they don't read the room and go along with the flow. They double down and they try harder, right? And they've got all the money and they've got all the technology and they've got all the resources and all the means, yeah. And right now they have the majority of our populations co-opted into a sideshow of a game, multiple sideshows. Yeah, it's almost like a matrix. It's almost like the movie The Matrix, right? Where the game that's being played, we aren't even, most of our rank and file neighbors are not even aware of what is happening, what's at stake. They are so deeply invested in the tribal ideological clashes that they're caught in. They can't understand that that is just a priced in necessary distraction to keep everybody mollified and engaged for various unhappy reasons. Yeah. Please help me put my train of thought together. I'm going to pop over and look at some of these comments. So Shan says, and without that self-actualization, the kind of awareness we would need for that evolution seems unlikely. Yes, it does seem unlikely, but again, extreme discomfort is the cure for extreme apathy, right? Pretty scary to wonder how far we would need to let this go. That's the part that I've been struggling as a younger man. I've been on this journey and this awareness for about 7-8 years now. And because I saw the trouble coming, this kind of anxious mania awoke up in me where I wanted to alert people to this, and I didn't have the subtlety of voice or language or all the rest of it to alert people to this. I just sounded like a raving madman. And I had to realize that if I ever wanted to be effective and useful, I had to ask the question, is my help helping? And then I also realized that all of that attrition and all of that failure and all of the saying it wrong was my apprenticeship to get to the point where I can actually say something intelligent, sane, balanced, and answer a lot of questions and challenges from a lot of quarters. So many people are only starting that process now. And what I want to do is arrive here in this moment and attract people who are called to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, but are wondering not only what to do, but how to go about doing it. I've learned a few things on this journey and I'd like to share them. So do you think that reorientation is also inevitable? What reorientation do you mean? You mean this reorientation to our evolutionary journey and to our ecology? Yes, it is ultimately inevitable, but it's not a foregone conclusion. So we might not be the generation or the civilizational arc that achieves that. We can actually crash and burn and fuck it all up and lose and get jettisoned back to some sort of dark age, and we can miss our turn. Nature does not need us to win this time. It just needs us to win. And it's not nature only at the helm. The invitation, as I see it, is for us to recognize the invitation, number one, and then start getting mature and getting pragmatic and getting serious about what such a project actually takes. And the simplest way of articulating that is that when you grow up psychologically, you have to realize that the predictive model that you have, the story that you have, that you want to be true, you have to outgrow that. You have to have your heart broken, and you have to have your dreams dashed. You have to have your promise stolen from you. as a young person to be initiated rudely into the reality of the world. And as it stands now, there is no form of visible leadership loud enough, visible enough, stable enough, um, broad enough, yeah, to welcome people who are coming through now and guide them effectively into such a project. Hmm. In an ideal world, what we would have is initiation would just be a cultural institution, a norm, just a norm. Animism would be normative. Animism would be normative. It would not be a stretch or considered woo woo to realize that we are in relationship with nature and realize that we are in relationship with the cosmos and realize that we are in relationship with ancestors and with descendants. Our inability to recognize and realize that is equal exactly to the disease that we are suffering from. And for so many of us, we come to this journey, especially listening to someone like me speak, we come to this journey from a reductionist perspective, a clinical perspective, a academic perspective. And we find it very, very difficult to work in um, perspectives that are not validated through those channels. But unfortunately, we're now at a nexus where the weight of that momentum and that meaning and that coherence is not equal to the conversation that we need to have in order to pass this threshold collectively as a species. Yes, towards alignment. I think I got there in the end. So what we're talking about today then is what each of us individually can do, because life is going to make people ready. Life is going to make us all collectively ready for this difficult transition. And so I want to talk about awakening, and I want to talk about the pitfalls of awakening. And if you pay attention to what I'm about to say, you'll recognize what's going on the internet everywhere around you. So number one, there are thinkers and thought leaders and writers and people who have evolved our ability to understand ourselves, like Carl Jung, for example, right? And he brought in these ideas of archetypes and the collective conscious and the collective unconscious. And he's not the only one to do it, but I thought he did it particularly well. And his work is enormously influential. And I also find his work aligned to what we're talking about. And he spoke about the collective consciousness, this intangible field of sentience, salience, consciousness, reference that we all share. That's non-material, but not immaterial. Yeah? And we haven't been able to put our finger on exactly what this is, this collective consciousness. And I'm here to tell you right now, the internet is our tangible mirror of that. Right now, if you go look at the state of the internet, all of the content, all of the actors, all of the behavior, right? All of that predictability, all of that chaos, all of that noise, all of that infantile behavior, all of that adolescent vitriol, nihilism, pursuit of shallow glamour, our fetishes of attention, all of that is an cuttingly accurate mirror of our current state of our collective conscious. That should tell you everything you need to know about the state of the problem right there. Okay. There are people on the internet today telling you some idealistic version that all we need to do is just get rid of governments. All we need to do is just do the inner work. Everybody just needs to do the inner work and then everything will be fine. None of these answers are complete. None of these answers are workable at scale. And I've debunked them in the previous videos one by one. I've debunked the anarchy video, right? Even though eventually we're going to have to, as a species, be anarchic. And I don't mean anarchy's got two meanings. The one is just a state of civil disorder and chaos when anything goes. And the other one is referring to a state of self-governance that isn't predicated on a hierarchical order. Yeah. We're going to have to get to the latter, but we're going to have to get through the first interpretation first. We can't just miraculously and idealistically jump to anarchy in its ideal form, because the snapshot of the internet as it stands now, as the mirror of our collective conscious, right? That is our collective mind right now. And it's a fucking mess. It's an adolescent horror show, right? That nightmare is equal to our unprocessed shadow that we're going to have to all individually work out. We haven't even got an eye on that project, let alone convergent language in which to do that, right? So there's no fucking ways we can just flip the switch, take governments away, and then suddenly everyone's just going to benefit because we have these examples of people in crisis helping people who are caught in bushfires, right? We just don't have the protocols or the habits, the social habits of operating at scale to cater towards that need. And what's happening, right, that I'm about to describe is these waves and waves of awakening, right? For some people, it's in a moment. For some people, it's in an ayahuasca ceremony. For some people, it's in the trauma of a divorce, or the treatment of a cancer in the family. For some people, it's watching the hemorrhaging of our social order and our civility, right, on the internet, and watching the way that is playing out on multiple fronts. Multiple fronts. It's all the dissonance and all the rest of it. Dissonance is one of those forms of psychic discomfort that does the work of pulling us apart, and eventually we can't sustain the dissonance, and we have to sort of jettison out of the safe bubble, the Plato's cave, the matrix of the prevalent narrative and prevalent predictive models and prevalent stories and prevalent paradigms by which society is still currently cohering, however badly. Yeah. And as a person who's going through an awakening arrives at that frontier, they suddenly sit in a place where they are unencumbered, but also unheld by that coherent paradigm and narrative, however fractured and frayed it might be. And at that horizon, they are confronted with the enormity of everything that is. The enormity of what it means to be a human being and be a human species and have all this opportunity at our fingertips, and all of the suffering that we're allowing to occur on our watch with absolutely no adult or mature or humane response to any of that. And as the nihilists pointed out, the human psyche cannot endure that level of freedom. That level of freedom is exactly equal to the uninitiated mind, to a sense of terror, pure existential terror. If you're unsure about what that means, go and look up the work of people like Sartre, right? I don't agree with him, but he got that part right. Camus' response was absurdism. The indifference of the world is so enormous, we can see at that frontier that all of our religions and all of our social probity and all of our niceties and all the rest of it are just these thinnest threads, the most vulnerable, delicate threads of coherence that can easily be abandoned in a moment. And human beings prove that every time a mob gets together. When a mob gets together, their response is catharsis, anger, vitriol. They tear things down. They harm people who are not their enemies. The reaction to whatever they're feeling that comes out in this catharsis is always excessive. And they burn down and break things and ruin things and destroy public institutions and trusts and facilities in a way that cannot be restored afterwards, least of all by the mob that did the burning and the breaking down. It's scary. Right, so all of that terror visits us in such a moment. And the uninitiated psyche didn't get to that point of awakening through a guided, structured path. Huh? And so they suddenly need to look around for some form of tethering, some form of psychic sanctuary, some form of sanity coherence, some new story, some new ism, some new promise, threat, belief, explanation in the world that they can belong to. Because belonging archetypally is a very important thing for the human psyche. And so they run out onto the internet or into their books or to their friendship circles or to some dark corner of Reddit or to the comment section of YouTube. And this is how they get into conspiracy theories. There's a whole red pill subculture that has convinced itself that its entire source of malaise and unhappiness is the fact that women are all evil gold diggers and they need to treat women like shit and to get their power back. There's a lot of crazy, stupid ideology that has taken root with people that arrive at these thresholds of disenfranchisement. And it's not only awakenings that lead us there. It's also when people find that they cannot be held in the containers of their family or their traditions or their communities, etc., and they feel disenfranchised. And then they go and look for succor or support or for sameness or for belonging. And this is how people become radicalized in jihadism. That's how people become radicalized in any form of religion. It's how the heterodox thinkers sit and heterodox each other into a heterodoxical mania and never quite get anywhere. There's a million ways of awakening is like awakening into a field of rabbit holes and false lights. And until you know how to step through that minefield, and how to sidestep and how to keep navigating forward and by what to navigate. No. You can easily get drawn into some ism or some project or some new bullshit story. That is what you're watching unfolding right now. And the people who are the most strident and the most certain are just the ones with a captured audience, because somehow the frantic masses are rewarding each other for that level of stridence and certainty. Only when you can make peace with uncertainty. Yeah, only when you can sit with discomfort. Only when you can discern fear from danger and pain from injury and discomfort from oblivion or loss. Only when you have discernment, only when you understand the power of heart alignment and authenticity and integrity and maturity and necessity. Only when you truly understand what sovereignty is and what agency is, yeah, and the human responsibility to care for ourselves, care for each other, and care for the environment as much as we appreciate and take from it, we also have to find some ways of giving back. No human being is happier, truly happier, than when they have discovered their ecological niche, how they can be of service to the environment and to their people and to the collective in an authentic way that recognizes their gifts and their forms of genius and the gift that they came here to share. That is the pursuit of actualization. Going off into the ether during this conversation, had to splash some water on my face for grounding, but I've found that just as effective as running to the internet. Still working on not feeling a lot of anxiety when the uncertainty really hits. Yes, and this is what I meant to talk about today, but I'm 35 minutes deep into the conversation already. I want to talk about how to go about grounding yourself, how to go about aligning yourself, how to go about practicing the presence, the discernment, and the intentionality that you need to safeguard yourself from the onslaught of noise and negative energy and distraction and chaos and pain. And because it's not as if everything that you're being distracted by is not worthy of our attention, right? There is so much demanding our attention, so much desperate need out there. Yeah. That we actually are overwhelmed because we don't know which fire to put out first. We don't know which voice to listen to first. We don't know which hand to put the $5 note in to feed that mouth first. It's all too much. It's all too much. And the response cannot be a bleeding heart. The response cannot be burnout to deplete ourselves. We have to find a way to keep our little ship, the hull intact, afloat, well managed, navigating well, and able to weather storms, able to get lost and find our way back again and again and again and again. Hey, Judd, nice to have you here. And that's actually what I want to talk about today, but I'm reluctant to make these videos too long, but c'est la vie. So how do we go about doing this, right? How do we weather all of this? How do we become helpful to the moment if we're spinning out and we're losing our shit and we're reactive and all the rest of it? And a very simple way I can suggest is if you consider what wrong, there we go. If you can consider what wrong looks like or what worse would look like and what better might look like, this becomes a project of going, well, if that's not helping me, what's its kind of diametric opposite? And I can get that assessment wrong. Yeah. But that's what I'm here for, to try and share what I understand on how to navigate and how to safeguard your sanity, how to safeguard your sovereignty and your agency so that you can keep, because it's not like you're not going to get lost in this again. You're going to get lost in this every day, sometimes several times a day. It's the nature of having an overwhelmed consciousness and an overwhelmed psyche and a nervous system to be overwhelmed in the present moment. Here is a thing you want to write down and keep somewhere next to you. It's a quote by a guy called Jiddu Krishnamurti. And it says, it is no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick environment. It is no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. We have a profoundly sick social environment. We have a profoundly sick environment. We've poisoned our environment. Our social commons, our areas of social discourse, they're all poisoned. Our media is poisoned. Our academia is poisoned. Science is poisoned. There's not a single enterprise by which human beings try to understand more and interact with reality. There's not a single enterprise of the ways in which humans cohere and collaborate socially and organize ourselves socially that is now not poisoned in some way. So it's no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick environment, right? And so somehow this is where metaphor and analogy is going to serve us really, really well. And what I want to make very clear from the onset, I think that the fear of social isolation is a big one. Very few people want to be the crazy person who was just awake too early. Yeah, of course. But that's exactly what courage looks like. Courage looks like saying, what does love look like right now? What would I want? Yeah. Is my help helping? Such questions. And sometimes the only way we can be of service to people is to step away from the closeness of it all, even if only at times. Now, dependent on our authentic alignment, some people, their authentic alignment is to be a paramedic in a war zone. Yeah. Or is to be at the coalface of some drama or problem. And that is where they can actually be most helpful. Now, not all of us are like that, right? We're going to have a spread of people that start engaging this project seriously. You need to find out what's true for you. And that can also change, because sometimes all you need to do is to build your own resilience and build your own sense of safety and sanctuary and your own stability, your own cadence. And then once you have that foundation, then you can go out and be more helpful in the world. The problem is our first knee-jerk response to awakening, especially if we're deeply empathetic, is we think we need to help, and we think we confuse movement with action. Yeah. We think I just need to do something, and then we go and do any old thing because it's so uncomfortable for us not to do anything. Being a parent, especially to a toddler, it was informative because you suddenly realize that your impulse to stop her from doing something, to to corner a situation, to intervene, to express yourself over the top of something, yeah, is actually not out of love. It's out of fear of your discomfort. Yeah. She needs to have her own experiences. She's going to get stung by bees. She's going to fall off her bike. She's going to have kids tease her and run away from her. I can't save her and protect her from all of that. And if I did, she's going to reach the next gateway of her development without the necessary resilience that she needs, right? We're all in this school together, right? And we're all dealing with our lessons. That doesn't mean we can turn a blind eye to suffering and need, but raw empathy, yeah, is rarely the answer. And uh, I think that radical form of self inquiry, that radical self audit, that radical honesty of going, why do I want to just react? Why do I want to say something on the internet? Why do I want to write a post? I want to do that because for some people, I just want to sound clever and I want the likes and I want the attention. But for some people, they genuinely care. And people who tend to be here in this conversation genuinely care. But we have to realize that so much of our impetus, our impulse, our default reaction to just do something it's not mature. It's actually because we can't sit with the discomfort. The reality is we cannot save the world from the discomfort that we're busy experiencing. If we mean to be of help, right, it's not the tiny incidents that are happening here and there. It's this sanity and this coherence and this momentum and this cadence. And like I said before, this beachhead that gets created, this welcome wagon that can start going, we're going this way. We're going, no, we don't do that anymore. Come over here. We'll work it out. We'll figure it out. We're going this way. Yes, we'll listen to all the woes and the dramas and all the rest of it. But in here, we first want to make sure that the tribe can keep moving towards tomorrow and be here tomorrow. We can't bleed ourselves dry. We can't leak all the energy out of our individual containers or our collective container to try and solve everything. So you need to see yourself as the hull of a ship. And that everything I'm talking about is fractal and therefore self-similar at multiple scales. So in myself, I see myself as a temple or a ship, something in which it's most important for me to safeguard the container of my own integrity and my own energy and my own sanity and my own self-knowing and my own relationship with myself. This is the safest place that I know in the universe is here. A big part of that involves coming into right relationship with the body and realizing that what we have to manage here is also a vestigial code base of primitive software and impulses and the profiles of an animal and the natural default responses of an animal and our personal histories and blah, 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 blah. This is the house I need to start making clean over time. And this is my first priority, is me. Self-ownership, self-awareness, self-knowledge, self-direction. This doesn't make us selfish. This enables us to be of service to the relationships that we care about, to be of service to the projects that we care most about. It's imperative that we get this right? Because you can have 20 well-meaning people that are immature, raw, empathetic, and they will generate as much drama as what they solve. Yeah. Am I making sense so far? Sadly, there is citizen powerlessness happening too blatantly in the US now. Yes. It takes more than our alert awareness and choices. Physical reality is now beyond lots of emotional intellectualizing. Yeah, well, I'm trying to do something other than emotional intellectualizing here for sure, James. Let's see how far we get. Shan says, I have been experiencing an intense pull to want to busy myself in the illusion because I'm worried about not having enough cushion if and when the shoe drops. But when I go through periods of fretting over worldly pursuits, the self awareness stalls, a bit of a tug of war. Yes. So, what you're describing is a thing called reluctance that we have to become aware of and manage the tension of. I'm going to say something to you now. The secret aim of all tension is transformation. This is a universal principle in chemistry, in biology, in human interaction, in physics and engineering. The secret aim of all tension is transformation. We need to live with that tension. We don't need to avoid it, and we don't need to get to a situation where it no longer exists. That tension is part of our essential guidance system. It reconfirms for us that we exist and we are a thing, a separate thing in the world. I am a self. I am a me. I am something other than everything else. I am part of everything else, but I am also a something other. I am the little ghost in the machine that is trying to wake up and play its part, but play its part in resonance and in harmony with the rest of the machine. But Rocco, am personally wired in such a way that I'm reluctant to lose my selfhood in that coming together, in that belonging. Yeah. And I do not believe in my heart that every single person is wired this way. Right? I happen to believe that we all have our own, let's call it dharma. We all have our own wiring about what we want most authentically in this world. And for some people, let's say the kind of people who pursue Advaita Vedanta or Buddhism, their ultimate deep wish is to be surrendered, is to be released, liberated from this terrible burden of being a self in the world. And that's what that project is for. Now, I'm not saying abandon the whole project. Let's take some of those things because they've got excellent technologies of mindfulness and awareness and embodiment, etc. And let me apply those, but I want to do them in a different context. I want to do them in such a way that I retain my selfhood. I want to actualize as a me. I want to be here still when we get past that threshold because I've got some genius that I want to pursue. I've got some creativity and some art and some playing. This is a game. We're in a game right now. We're in a game. And it's not a flippant, fickle, silly game, but it doesn't not have real risks either. But I want to play in that game. I'm happiest when I'm not philosophizing about all of this, when I'm not teaching all of this stuff. I am happiest when I'm writing poetry and philosophizing about cool stuff and making electronic music. And I've got different ways that my itch gets scratched. And I want to get there. And I want to make room for that. And I want to explore and practice that. But right now, what leadership and what love looks like to me is to try and find some way of being a part of the solution so that we can all get there, or so that more of us can get there, so that that possibility for every single human being is a thing that we can all wake up to or bequeath to the generations yet to open their eyes to the world. That's important to me. Okay, so step one, and we're going on 48 minutes now. Step one is about curating that self. Peace and so long for today. Au revoir, James. How to safeguard that? Now, we need common language for that. So there's a woman called Dr. Betty White, and she is a psychologist, and her starting point was talking about consent in the context of intimacy, in the context of relationship. And she's got this thing called the Wheel of Consent. And she explains, you can go look her up, Dr. Betty Martin, The Wheel of Consent. Very good video. I would go watch it. But when you watch it, I want you to realize that the useful context so far eclipses the narrative of intimacy between a couple in a bedroom, right? Although that happens to be a very useful analogy by which to understand what I'm about to say now. That circle of consent that she talks about, where right action happens within that circle of consent and wrong action happens outside that circle of consent. It's such a shame there's not a sharing function, because I would just share my screen and explain this all to you. But in the wheel of consent, what the thesis is that Dr. Betty Martin so brilliantly unpacks is that there's things that we do. Uh, th- I can be the recipient. I can be the doer of a thing, and someone else can be the receiver of that doing. And then there's a gift that's passed. There's a who it's for, right? And we always assume when we're doing things to someone else and our intention is surreptitiously a gift, that we think we are being benevolent and giving them something. Where in fact it's not something that they wanted to receive, or at the time that they wanted to receive it, nor in the way that they wanted to receive it. And they indulge us so as not to hurt our feelings. Right. That's not the whole sum of the entire conversation. That's an example of the confusion that can exist about our intentionality and whether our help is helping, or whether it's welcome, or whether we're forcing somebody else to endure or indulge us in our lack of awareness. And all of this is held together by this wheel of consent. Consent, here's the rules of consent. Consent can only be given by an adult. A consent is only communicated through an enthusiastic yes, and can only be given or considered given if both parties both understand what is being asked and what is at stake. Right? Think of how all of our social contracts in marriage, in education, in healthcare, in corporate services, in software agreements, in all of these subscriptions that we now use, the one thing that is not fucking present remotely is consent, right? And without consent being the most sacred boundary for any interaction or for any form of selfhood or containership, the risk of things leaking in and leaking out are high. The risk of things being extorted are high. The first thing we need to safeguard is our understanding of how to preserve our own consent. If your no doesn't mean no, your yes means nothing. Yeah. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. Good walls make good neighbors. We need good boundaries. We need limits. Yeah. That doesn't mean our current limits become our permanent limitations. These are things we can evolve and change over time. But we need to know where our limits are, and we need to safeguard our bounds, and we need to know how to protect them, even from our own impulses. Yeah. Just that, just understanding that, and rifling through all the different kinds of interactions you have in your life, start illuminating how profoundly uninitiated we are into this adult project of looking after and being a self. Where are we, and who's got any questions? Anything, any interactions? Otherwise, I start winding myself here, just blabbing into the camera. Nothing, huh? So let me backtrack a bit and see if I've managed to touch at all what I thought was important today. I wanted to start talking about what the synopsis is, and yeah, go for it. Shan, go for it. And thanks, Judd. I wanted to talk about the synopsis of what's happening, what awakening looks like, and how it's happening in waves, and how we're responding to it collectively and socially. And what people that are at least listening to this message, you're assuredly along here for the ride to start figuring out, what can I do? How can I be part of the solution? The first thing I would say is not to stop caring completely about the world outside, but to make yourself into someone whose help is well timed, well given, well measured, well moderated, that you remain the adult in the room, that you remain the helpful party in any exchange. Yeah. Sovereignty, agency, self-awareness, self-knowledgement, self-regulation is essential. And it sounds antithetical, because it sounds like it's all about self. And yet the self is the building block, the atomic, essential, critical building block of any relationship, any meaningful relationship, and any meaningful um, tribe, group, project, nation, society. I agree. Can take that one layer deeper to the level of thought. Consent for the thoughts you think, act on. That's really good advice. Yes, Shan, now you're getting it. The whole idea is to start realizing that you are responsible for the hull, the boundary, the barrier of what gets in and what gets out. Right. That doesn't mean that you stop. Another way of putting this is talking about giving and receiving. Yeah. Let's say that we looked at human beings as little nodes on a big circuit board, and we all have needs and we all have gifts. Yeah. There is a giving and a receiving that can happen at multiple levels, right? Indiscriminate giving is a problem, and indiscriminate receiving is a problem. If you indiscriminately receive the wrong kinds of energy, the wrong kinds of input, the wrong kinds of feed into yourself, the wrong food, the wrong digital diet, the wrong energetic transfer, you suffer. And in your suffering, the whole suffers, because your ability to participate in the healthy vibe that should be going on is now compromised and diminished. In your indiscriminate giving, yes, this is where we inadvertently give to the hungry parasite more than we give to the needy mouth that needs fed. We have to build our discernment. We have to be the arbiter of what we give and receive. Because if you have too many nodes in the mesh that have no discernment and just bleed out to anything, this is how we allow our psychic energy, our goodwill, our gifts to be leached by parasitic forces in our relationships, in our environments, in our communities, and in our social infrastructure. This is so important to understand, right? We don't even know who or what is co-opting our internal conversation. We don't even practice awareness to the degree that we are watching our thoughts arriving. It's like sitting in a dark cinema and looking at the screen, right? And eventually someone tells you that this is a movie, right? And you've got to safeguard that you realize that what's happening on the movie is not real life and it's not really going to get you. And then you think you've got the whole game sorted out because now you're vigilantly watching what's happening on the screen. But the voice that undermines your agency doesn't come from the screen only. It comes from the dark in the cinema beside you and next to you. That is happening all the time in your own conscious experience as we speak, right? You are the sum total of programming and framing and priming and education and pop culture influence and experiences, and however your psyche is shaped to respond even to a triggering word, or to the fact that you had too many coffees today, or that you asked for a decaf and they gave you a normal espresso shot. And suddenly you're feeling anxiety. You don't know why, you're not aware, and you just connected with something that occurs or happens. There is all of this, right, that is happening to author your experience that you wouldn't have chosen if you were more aware. We're still trying to put new wine in old wineskins, and so it seems to me, your coherence and transformation ideas resonate with me. Well, I'm really glad for that, because it would be a jolly big waste if I was talking to a field of no resonance. So I'm glad to hear that, and stay close because I'm just getting going. Judd says, the self is that which the collective feeds on or benefits from. Yeah, that's true. Therefore, the self is that which can most effectively curate a wiser collective. First, look within. Yes, first look within. But here's the paradox to that, Judd. What we're missing in that self, and I'll wrap up after this, what we're missing in that project of self-curation is the question of alignment. of orientation. What are we orienting to and what are we aligning to? If every single one of us just took a isolated feed or direction from within, that is also a description of what it is to be equal to self-delusional. Yeah. Sociopaths take cues totally from within. They're not aware that there's a brokenness in them. Hmm? So here's a paradox now. What is missing is also this relationship to what is without, not just within. It's a tricky one. The problem is, if you follow the work of Ian McGilchrist, which I'm going to repeat over and over and over and over and over again, there's a seminal work called The Master and His Emissary. It's a long, dry book, and I wouldn't recommend it as casual toilet reading for anybody. But if you read the first 20 pages of his introduction, you'll get the entire synopsis, and all the rest is just the repeated proof. Go along to ChatGPT now. Go and ask, what is the thesis of Ian McGilchrist's The Master and His Emissary? And tell me how this informs or shapes the problems, the left brain dominant disease or illness, collective illness that we now share in our reductionism and our uh, sociopathic behaviors in a corporate sense, everything right at the moment that we're dealing with is sociopathic. And he'll explain, this infernal device will explain to you what Ian McGilchrist's book is about. And the short version is that we are living a left brain dominant culture. We've been inducted and initiated and induced into these left brain ways of perceiving the world, orienting to the world, and shaping all of our narratives and predictive models. And the moderating, remedial aspect of our consciousness and our thinking mind and our cognition is the right brain, right? It is the one that should be in charge of what to do and what's important and what's necessary, and give jobs to the left brain to do. Yeah, that's what a healthy, initiated person, that's the circumstance that they enjoy. In our current circumstance, that's exactly flipped. And the problem is when the left brain takes charge, it is ignorant of the necessity or the relevance of the right brain. It is like a manager in a business where the boss is away, and it thinks now it is the boss. And it's not evil necessarily, but it does things in the way of a pernicious, pedantic accountant, and it creates all these rules and structures and these musts and shoulds and coulds, which are blind and deaf to that which is most nourishing, most necessary, most salient for a human being to be whole, well, and well adjusted. Soul is what is missing when life feels wrong. And the right brain can be equated with this concept of soul. Soul doesn't need to mean anything more than the human thirst and capacity for connection, for meaning, for belonging, for vitality, for imagination. All of those things are functions of a right brain dominant human being and a right brain dominant culture and a right brain dominant society. Animism is that. Animism is that. The right brain sees itself as living in ambient relationship with everything and everything else. Right. So the irony is, it's not just good enough that we clinically look at this, the sense of self, and focus all of our energy and our attention inwards and make sure we're taking only signal from self. Yes, you have to take signal from self, because your heart, your authenticity, your truth is the compass by which you need to navigate this mess and every other mess that you encounter in the world. But you have to do so in awareness of what is real and what is true in the universe and in the world around you. And the only way you can do that is to heal yourself from that left brain capture and find sanctuary again in your own mythic form of sense making. Yeah. Without losing your tether to the rational and the real and the logical. Yeah. Reading it at the moment. I got it for Christmas. Yeah. That is a tough read. I agree about the left brain versus right brain. In my opinion, the mind is actually meant to receive direction, which can be found in the heart prism of the soul. And that signal is only clear and unfettered when we are restored in a healthy way, in a wholesome way, to our right brain ascendancy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I shall leave you with a poem, and then I shall wrap up. This is a poem called The Monkey, and it's from a book I wrote called Stepping Through, which might be backwards on your screen, but c'est la vie. It's available on Amazon, The Old Enemy. The Monkey, number 19, and it's about exactly this. Once upon a time, which is a encoded way of invoking the right brain. Once upon a time, a monkey who carried the spirit of perfection in its heart spoke into the mute silence of its soul, saying, "Do not be overwhelmed. Do not be overwhelmed. The parts of you that I am speaking to, the part of you that I am speaking to, ladies and gentlemen, is the other half of your experience that is still asleep. Do not be overwhelmed. The part of you that I am speaking to is the other half of your experience that is still asleep. Overwhelm is the language of the precise lesser half of your full experience. Overwhelm is the language of the precise lesser half of your full experience that stayed awake when the master was induced to slumber by the cold discomfort and urgency of the world that you have helped create. This unworthy steward lives in its own dream and believes it is the master. It is not a liar by heart, but it lies easily. Its dishonesty is due to ignorance, and that it is fluent only in languages other than love. The master is the sleeping giant in you, the king or the queen in exile, who is longing to return and whose kingdom is all the poorer for their absence. The emissary has allowed the soul to leave the palace, and thereby the magic to leave the kingdom. The emissary is half blind, half deaf, half mute, and very clever, and altogether senseless. And the monkey's lord, the king, the queen in exile, answers with a question, saying, "Who are you, monkey? Who are you, monkey?" To which the monkey replied, when I forget who I am, I follow the way, and when I remember who I am, the way and I are the same." The ancient Greeks believed there were two languages with which we might hold the conversation of life. They used these two languages to describe the world and their place in it, and the experience that this created. And they called these languages logos, which is reason, and mythos, which is imagination. And they lived with an idea that wisdom was the ability to hold the conversation of life with life in both languages at the same time. And they called this wisdom being double-minded. And this book was an invitation to double-mindedness, because every true gift is an invitation to the deeper gift, and so on. And our illness is soullessness. No one and everyone is to blame. The illness is a byproduct of the unconscious, unwise manner in which we have been pursuing our comforts and the promise of safety. It is the environment and the lifestyles we have been creating generation by generation until we arrived here in this moment completely ill with anxiety, disconnection, isolation, and depletion. Our illnesses caused us to create ever more unwell systems, processes, and ideologies that had some crack cocaine benefits with some long-term compounding side effects. Our illness is defined as our sense of reductionist logic and reason, the mundanity of our own story, and how trivially we see ourselves. All of that inflated to the point that it is drowned out and eclipsed its natural equalizing force, our sense of soul, our sense of symbolism, our sense of myth and metaphor, and in short, our sense of meaning. And our sense of meaning is the mediating cure for the former. I'm nearly done. Our sense of connection with meaning has been cauterized, and its flow of vitality in our lives has been stemmed and dammed up by the ecologically irresponsible developers of our pathologically self-centric sense of reductionism and logic. The sense of reductionism and logic is essential to a human life. However, left to its own devices, it will create its own hell. We are here now, childishly behaving and childishly believing that the child's story, that someone else is going to come and rescue us. No one else is coming. You are who came. You are who came. You chose this. Now choose this. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm done for today. This is getting longer and longer, which is becoming something of a challenge. I think I actually only wanted to do like 20 minutes, but I'm going to have to chunk these things up. But thank you very much for those of you that came along and took part in the conversation. Shan, I'll reach out to you because at some point in time, thank you, Judd, I'd like this conversation to deepen and to become a bit more structured. I do want to keep bringing out these sort of invitational conversations, just talking about the present moment, but I also want to start siphoning this into a few projects. The one is, how do we actually start implementing some protocols and practices and tools and concepts and language that we can all cohere on and make sense of ourselves and of the moment and actually become more useful to the people that we're trying to serve through our writing projects on Substack for a start. And then secondly, launch a public speaking platform, a speaker series, where we get people, maybe some of among you, who have something interesting to contribute in the form of a not too polished, a bit of a keynote, bit of a talk, bit of an address, bit of an idea. And as long as it's coherent with this and in alignment with this and supportive of this intentionality, I will help boost it, platform it, share it, guide it, mentor it, whatever you need from me. But I'd like to get more voices in here, and I'd like this to be like a kind of flag on the battlefield for the human soul at the moment to say, come here. Sanity is here. Human beings are here. We are trying to figure out something intelligent and meaningful and necessary, and finding a way forward. So I'm going to need moderators. I'm going to need, as I said to Shan, and there was somebody else that reached out yesterday as well. All kinds of help is going to be welcome. And so for a start, just liking this helps the algorithm boost this, sharing this, commenting. Just be part of it, just be part of it. Okay, folks, thanks. I'll try and figure out a way to make this shorter next time, but I'm having so much fun. I'm going to sign off. Have a beautiful evening. Take care.